Hey everyone.
Hey Matt, hey Renata.
No.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi there.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Good morning. I will put the agenda in the chat. There's not much on there today.
Yeah, I just added a couple of small items. Matt, just saw that you created it.
No, I did. Yeah, I saw that already.
Cool.
I probably should have done it earlier, but it slipped my mind. We had a holiday in the US yesterday.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Which holiday is that?
President's Day. Um,
Ah, cool.
George Washington's birthday, whatever you want to call it. Okay, let's see. Where was I? I was going to share this. We have some items that are not on here, so feel free to add them. I'm going to do um I want to discuss the plugin API. I don't think there's any general announcements. Release updates, we'll get one from Justin, or so on 24.1.1, which was a maintenance update, basically. And we'll discuss the upcoming 24.2. And GitHub Actions is the context. Okay, this meeting is being recorded and there is a Hyperledger antitrust notice, so go take a look at that. For the housekeeping items, just stay on mute if you're not speaking. And if you have a question, I think you're all adults here, we can figure it out, but there is a hand raise feature. Other than that, we can get started. Does anyone have any general announcements that are not on the agenda? I don't see any in there, and I personally don't have any.
Just maybe I wanted to suggest an open question. So we discussed it internally with some people about GDPR compliance and Besu and architecture based on events and state specific. So just if we have time in the end.
We definitely will. I'm gonna put that under the open forum. So GDPR
Thank you.
and events, state-based architecture. Cool. All right. To be aware of is that I've updated the roadmap on the public network side for, well, the roadmap link in the agenda doesn't work for some reason. But if you go to the actual roadmap page, I've updated the public roadmap. So Matt, I don't know if you well, we could discuss the version upgrade, downgrade, and the QBFT stuff, but once we ship that, we should probably shift it because I think I shifted the releases up basically. So 24.1 is now the now, and then beyond, blah blah blah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I haven't been back to it for a month or so. So yeah, it definitely needs an update given that we've had one release and another one just coming up.
Not a problem at all. I just wanted to let you know that I mean, it still makes sense because we're shipping all this stuff now, just so that whenever you have a moment. But anyway, there is updates there. So for those in the recording and those on the call, I've updated the roadmap from the perspective of what Consensus is working on in the public side. So if you're curious, you can check that out. I'm going to update the link in the agenda that's broken. But why don't we dive right into the release next? I don't think there's anything, unless there's any questions. I'll share it in chat if there's any questions on anything in the roadmap. We can also revisit it if people want to scan the document. I'll give it like 5 seconds. I don't know, Justin, I think we can probably go right to the release, and then maybe if we have questions on the roadmap, we'll return after that.
Sure thing. Okay, hey everybody, it's me again. I'm talking about my favorite subject, GitHub Actions, et cetera, et cetera. The 24.1.1 release was our first release that actually executed with the GitHub Actions based CI build. However, we were running in dual mode, which means we also ran the Circle CI build pipeline. What we released to the public came off of the Circle CI pipeline. However, we did take the output from the GitHub Action pipeline and did the same burn-in process, testing, et cetera, with it, and it behaved just the same as we expected. So that was good. That was kind of our first dress rehearsal. Next steps is going to be a 24.2.0 RC1 release, which we have been discussing in Discord. And that one will be taking it a step further where we're going to switch roles and the Circle CI build will now shadow the GitHub Actions build. So the good news is that we have lots of stuff going into this release and we're planning on doing multiple RC type builds. So expect to see an RC1 going out maybe today. We will be cutting it from main. We will be putting out subsequent RC2s as needed. I don't forecast that being necessary, but fully expect us to, maybe want to refine this process a little bit during this release. And I think one thing that I do want to test out is sort of an emergency takedown procedure. Like what would happen if we published a bad build? How would we pull it down and quarantine it and keeping people from downloading it in the future? Perhaps we'll try that with RC1. For more details about the actual build process and how it works, you can see it all running today in our repo. If you look at any PR, you'll see the list of checks that get run onto it are no longer just Circle CI checks. There will be a whole bunch of other things being run now by GitHub Actions. You'll see what should look to you like a lot of duplication to what Circle CI does. It might be broken up a little bit, but I can go into more detail on specifics if there's any specific questions. There is a somewhat up-to-date document in the wiki on the GitHub Actions build pipeline. I do plan on updating that today as well. That will be probably stabilized, I think. And I I think that's about it. I'd love to open it up for questions, comments, concerns, proposed additions. You know, do people feel like they have enough insight into clarity and transparency on the subject as it's been going? Those types of questions. Okay. If you do have any suggestions, I'm still the point of contact for this at the moment. I'm trying not to become the Circle CI / GitHub Actions / CI/CD guy. Try to document the hell out of everything, and everything lives in GitHub. So, you know, if you want to take a crack at making some changes here, go at it.
You want to share me that where it lives so I can paste it here?
Yes. Well, it lives in that wiki. It is under, let me see if
Oh, I can
actually
add it.
roll-
Oh no.
It's under the design documents. Yep, design documents, CI/CD migration. If you just look for CI/CD, you'll find it. But here, I'll post the link. No.
It's called what? CI/CD pipeline migration.
CI/CD migration. There you go.
Sweet. Any other comments, concerns on that one? I think we'll get more feedback on the next as well.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
All right, Matt Whitehead, you have the floor.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so there were just a couple of things that Matt and I chatted about, kind of offline of the contributor calls, and I thought it was worth just sharing some of that. It's probably just like 5 minutes of mainly describing some stuff that I'm looking at, particularly around enterprise-oriented testing. Looking for any comments on that, and just trying to raise some, you know, more medium-term discussion about what, if you go to the bottom of that document, Matt, there's just a small section around this. I wasn't sure if this part of the wiki was the right place to put it, because the rest of that document is kind of literally how to run some tests, and this is kind of a bunch of thoughts of mine. So yeah, we can shove stuff around. The reason for spending a bit of time looking at this, which that kind of opening paragraph on that page talks about, is that currently there is kind of good unit and functional level testing for kind of the BFT consensus algorithms and the sequence transaction pool, which is the pool that we're kind of pushing enterprise users to. What I think there probably is a bit of a gap around is that per release testing of a version, and the amount of testing that kind of does more longer soak testing of some of the enterprise-oriented features, like the BFT consensus algorithms and the sequence pool, with the layered pool becoming the default in 2310, is kind of inadvertently partly, but it's kind of now the fact that any soak testing against public chains isn't going to exercise the sequence pool anymore. So we kind of lose some testing that we'd get of a big chunk of what an enterprise user is going to be running as code, because the testing of that pool isn't what's covered in a public chain test now, because that's going to use the layered pool. So generally, that hopefully kind of gives some context as to why, you know, I'm spending some time looking at this. What I've started putting in here is some thoughts around what enterprise testing might cover that wouldn't necessarily be the focus of public chain testing. And then I'm also in parallel looking at how we can do that in a way that's not super intrusive to kind of Besu's PR process or release process. and is easy for anyone to pick up and run and get some benefit from. So the kind of things that I've started putting down here are things around higher transaction throughput, higher TPS testing for kind of longish periods of time. So we tend to try and exercise Besu, and when we're looking at releasing a version to our users, at least at 400 TPS on a moderately performant environment with 4 validator nodes, because that's kind of, for us now, I think that's certainly Besu is certainly capable of that, and for us now that therefore becomes our point of regression testing for enterprise users, certainly in financial institutions that are looking to get high TPS through an individual chain. Then chain state integrity testing, so checking that if you go from one version to another version, all of the the state earlier on in the chain is still good. Doing things like creating a chain at the previous version and deploying contracts and invoking contracts to create some state, and then upgrading to a new version and checking that all of that state remains intact, that kind of testing. I've mentioned downgrade testing on here, and that was one of the items I kind of put on the agenda separately, because there's been a lot of discussion in Discord and on a particular PR around to what extent Besu either is downgrade capable or should have options to at least notify you if you're about to downgrade inadvertently, perhaps. And so either testing that downgrades work, or testing that you can't accidentally do a downgrade, which for a lot of enterprise users is kind of a really important case in point. And then some other bits and pieces around lower TPS, because it's still a solid number, but like for hours, churning through for hours and hours and hours, and also then looking at transitions between milestones, because I think for public chain that kind of ship has sailed for a lot of the milestones, right? When Ethereum mainnet moves up to a given fork, Besu moves along with it, and then that ship has sailed. Whereas in enterprise use cases, our customers will be running, some of them with Berlin, some of them with London, some of them with Shanghai, some of them with somewhere in between, and they will be doing transitions at different point. And so testing transitions, I think for us, is quite an important area to kind of exercise as well. So that's some of the thinking around what enterprise-oriented testing might look like. And what I've been doing, I could maybe just share a screen for a second, Matt, if that's all right.
Sure.
So this is very much kind of a work in progress idea for how this might be achieved, and it's certainly nothing pretty at all at the moment, but just to kind of, there we are. I think I can just share IntelliJ, right? So if I just focus in on where I'm looking at here, so Besu already has acceptance tests for things like BFT mining acceptance tests, which do a bunch of things like create a miner and check the transactions are mined and so on, or create several nodes and again check the transactions go through, which is really, really valuable. What I've been looking at is creating a more of a BFT mining soak test, which is configurable to run for an arbitrary amount of time, and goes through a bunch at the moment, just a few of those, a bunch of those kind of steps that are useful to exercise. So starting off by just standing up 4 validator nodes and checking that that chugs along as expected, that blocks are getting mined, over the first hour or so of the test. Then moving on to things like stopping a node and checking that you still get blocks mined, although albeit fewer of them, because you're now down by 1 validator. So consensus is going to have a delay on every 4th block for 4 nodes. But at least checking it continues to mine, stopping more nodes and checking that at this point, the chain stops, and then resuming nodes and checking that once you resume those nodes, they resync, the chain carries on as you'd expect. So a lot of that kind of, this at the moment, this is just really basic starting and stopping nodes, checking that the chain just proceeds as you expect. And my intention is to add to this first and foremost, make it configurable so that you could say run this for an hour, and that might mean you get 10 minutes in step 1, 10 minutes in step 2, and so on. And if you choose to run it for 6 hours, you get, you know, a proportional increase in the amount of time that each of the steps runs for. That kind of idea is what I'm working to at the moment, and that this would be easily runnable as a Gradle task if someone chooses to run it, but it wouldn't be a Gradle task that's run on every build, and it probably wouldn't be run necessarily when we're cutting release. It's just there as a really convenient way to run a bunch of soak testing. And our way of consuming this, if we were using it, might be that when we're about to ship a release, we pull the version, we run this specific task for 12 hours, 24 hours, a few days on a dedicated VM, and use that as part of our kind of soak testing, that the version is in really good shape for a lot of these kind of enterprise scenarios. Yeah, so nothing super exciting or pretty there, just to set a bit of the scene and kind of that kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm spending some time in the Besu space at the moment. I'd appreciate any comments or thoughts on how I'm approaching it, or what we should be testing, and so on.
So for one thing, Matt, thank you for documenting some of that in the wiki. I'm going to make sure I keep an eye on that. We do have some folks here at Consensus that are particularly interested in testing and testing approaches and increasing our coverage, as well as identifying gaps and making sure things like what you've discovered are regularly tested to the degree that is necessary. So
Great.
Continuing to document that in the wiki would be awesome. And when we have broader discussions, I'll make sure those people reach out to you.
That would be great. Thanks very much, Justin. Yeah, my hope is that it wouldn't be too long until I could update that page and say, look, to run the current flavor, which does these first 2 steps, say, just run this Gradle task, a bit like that testing document says today. Here's how to run this acceptance test. And I'd hope that it won't be too long until I can put something in there, having, you know, raised a PR that says, here's how to run a soak test for an hour that's going to do these couple of checks. And that way, it then becomes like an iterative process of, when I find time to add a check that transitions between milestones, I can stick that in, and so on. So yeah, my hope is that it becomes really consumable to run and really easy for someone, if they think of a case that's worth adding in, that they can, yeah, trivially do that.
Yeah, that sounds very easy. Excellent.
Yeah, this sounds fantastic. Like the additional test coverage of the cases that, you know, at least Consensus, the Canaries don't really test, like 400 TPS chain soak tests. It does a little bit run counter to the goals that we have to modularize the code base and, you know, kind of not have the kitchen sink, everything in the kitchen sink approach in the repo. I'm wondering if you have thought about, I mean, we could do this for several things, including reference tests and other things that don't need to be run via CI. Creating like a Besu tests repo where we can include the main repo as a dependency, and, you know, go, you know, really robust with any test suite we want to have without necessarily having to put all of these specific test cases into the main repo.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because it is going away from kind of the aims of kind of making the code base more modular. Yeah, I'm very open to moving towards things like the test cases being in a standalone repo. For me initially, I probably won't try and tackle that just for this particular case, but I'd be very happy to, if someone wants to work on how that might, you know, the mechanics of that and repos and things, I'd be very happy to be involved in that. Certainly, Gary.
Cool. Yeah, I think we have similar needs around, you know, performance regression tests and things like that we don't want running on CI. So maybe we can kind of dovetail those efforts and put these into move these into like kind of a meta repo that can
absolutely
still go for the modular goals.
Yeah, and just to be sort of super clear, the task that I'm adding at the moment wouldn't be run automatically anywhere as part of CI. My intent would be that it's available. So my way of consuming it currently is I'm pulling a recent version. I typically do install dist, and I'm running off that, and then occasionally I just do Gradle BFT soak test, and it goes off running that just on my laptop, and that would be something we might run as part of our build pipeline here. and anyone, you know, maybe it becomes an easy way of running it as part of an optional CI/CD pipeline. But yeah, again, it certainly doesn't prereq it being part of the main code base at all.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Matt. This is actually very interesting. So if I understand correctly, this is like more an acceptance test with an acceptance criteria. It is not like a performance test, right? Because like if we have, let's say, 4 nodes with the 400 TPS, 4 nodes will be on the same instance, like on your laptop or on the CI/CD VM. So in this case, we were just generating load, but we don't have the metrics, right? We are not monitoring like the system. We just want like that the blocks should be created in time, and the chain moves forward, right?
Yeah, that's the way I'm thinking of it. I think performance testing to get the absolute best performance out of a particular particular setup with specific machines and VMs is I think a standalone separate task to this. I think what I've put in that test that list of test items is kind of a reflection of where I observe you're at now in terms of what you can achieve just on a laptop. I can run 4 QBFT nodes on a laptop, but I can hit 400 TPS and it chugs through and it's fine. So this is more, well, if we're at that point now, that's great. And this is really almost a performance functional test to spot is that, you know, does a future release regress that? Does it increase memory consumption requirements so much that actually you can't do that anymore without, you know, doing something else like tuning the heap size and so on. So yeah, this is much more proving that given that that's where we're at now, it doesn't regress and that a future release is still in good shape, not driving it to the absolute maximum that could be possibly achieved looking at graphs in Grafana and capturing all the metrics. No. So my view would be there would be more functional failure cases as part of the test, which would show, hey, it's not running at 400 TPS now. We're getting errors with nonce too far in the future, things like that, that just mean the test fails at that point. It stops, fails. It's not a tuning scenario. It's just the test has failed at that point.
Yeah, well, it gives an idea of any like performance regression, for example. The test would fail if there is any performance regression.
Yeah, my intent is that you don't have to consume a load of logs after it and decide if it's passed or not, that it just has a binary pass or fail result. So you can leave it running for 6 hours and come back and you can just look at whether or not it passed or not. You might then have to drill into logs if it fails to understand a bit more about why. But in the passing case, it should be the case that, hey, it passed. So it's definitely, you know, it's categorically, it's fine. I don't have to go and check a graph looked healthy for that period of time. I just know that the asserts in the test are sufficient to prove that it is good enough.
Right. Thanks.
One thing that comes to mind, Matt, is that this sounds an awful lot to me like Sonar's quality gates that they have. That might be an area worth exploring, where you could set up a custom quality gate with Sonar Cube, and as part of our monitoring, use whatever you want. If you wanted to break something out to a separate module, as Gary was suggesting, or use the existing thing, then you could get a regularly, like nightly, weekly, etc. check on, you know, what's in main and is it still passing this gate, this hour, you must be this fast to ride this ride at the playground.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Justin. Yeah, I will take a look at that because I think, yeah, anything that we can use as a gate to say, yeah, pass or fail is valuable. And if it can be run on a periodic basis, there's not every PR and it's not every release necessarily, but it gives us the option to schedule it if we want to. Yeah, that would be great.
Is there anything else that you want to make sure I capture in the notes? I was more paying attention to what you were saying and less typing.
No, nothing for me particularly. No, I think my main aim was to get these kind of comments and feedback. So no, that sounds good.
Anything you want to talk about the downgrade protection?
That I just wanted to raise as a standalone thing. So again, hopefully this is just a couple of minutes, and it's just to raise I think just the high level, an area that I think we're hearing from enterprise users at the moment is a kind of a priority for them. So there's been a lot of really good discussion on that PR and in Discord about whether or not Besu should have just a high level conceptual ability to let you prevent a downgrade if you never intend to downgrade. If you're an enterprise user and you never intend to do a downgrade except in exceptional circumstances, then anything that helps you avoid doing that by accident, and this partly comes from something we've experienced with certain users, where if you are doing CI/CD to build, roll out, stand up Besu chains, and you have an error in your pipeline somewhere, something goes wrong, it's not a user doing an install in the traditional sense on a VM where they go and install or install a lower version of a bit of software, and then it's quite a kind of a manual task by an operator. If you're installing and standing up software through CI/CD, there's the potential that something isn't quite right, something goes wrong, the wrong image tag is picked up, and what you end up with is running a downgrade version of Besu without intending to at all. That's the context for the PR that I put in there. A lot of the discussion has been really good around, well, is this something that the database layer, the storage layer of Besu should be protecting against, which is one take. The other is, well, we have the RocksDB storage layer today, which is a plugin. Someone could introduce their own plugin tomorrow. Maybe it's not even in the repo. And if Besu's downgrade protection is in the database storage layer, that's specific to that particular implementation of storage. And the way that I've kind of approached this more generally is to say, well, look, someone can plug in any storage layer. What it would be useful to have is for you to say, as a user of Besu, I'm going to tell you when I might have a reason to downgrade. But please don't, regardless of what the storage layer is. I know I'm never going to do a downgrade unless it's a really exceptional circumstance. So the point of the PR is say, no, way above the database layer, above the storage layer, this is just a general store the version that most recently started. That's part of the PR, is to add a new metadata file. And the most recent version that started successfully gets updated in there. Every startup, if the version of Besu that happens to be starting is downgraded from the version that most recently started, you have a check in there to say, well, do you really want to do that? So I just wanted to raise it as a bit of context as to the enterprise scenarios we're hearing, and we're trying to kind of steer some function into Besu that can help avoid some of those cases. And just maybe see if this item can move along a little bit. I know various people have kind of chipped in with comments. So that was the reason, just for kind of putting it in the agenda to get some general discussion, but that's about it.
Hi, Matt. So first of all, sorry for being silent on this PR for
No problem,
the
Fabio.
last few years.
No
Sorry.
problem.
Yes, as you said, we had the discussion on GitHub, also Discord on this, and probably what is my view is more on mainnet. So my doubt was mostly about who will need this option, but it seems that you are saying that there is a request for this kind of protection from some user.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's partly request, it's partly having observed some situations that some users have got into accidentally. It's about trying to get Besu to help them avoid that. I guess that's the primary thing, and as part of working through some of those issues with customers, yeah, implicitly there's been a bit of a request around, you know, could this not have been avoided, how we got into the, it's kind of their fault, stuff happened, but could Besu have done more to help them avoid that?
Okay, I see. Yes, because this was one of my last doubts to see if this is something that will be really used or not. And as a general protection, okay, so I understand that there is the need for this. And since we now have the profiles, we can enable this for enterprise user, as if you think is worth for enabling for every enterprise user or not.
Yeah, I certainly think the profiles help a lot, because I totally take the point that for public chain users, it's not going to be nearly as big a problem. And having enterprise users need to set a flag, which is to kind of enable the protection, I think is totally makes sense. And the profiles make that now even easier.
Okay. And I'm also a bit sorry because I actually probably started the whole things not correctly changing the version of the database when I did the variable storage. So as part of this in the database only stuff, I am doing the now, say, changing the version to and adding some protection against the specific RocksDB downgrade if it's not a clean downgrade. So the two PR are focusing on different things. They both add protection because we should correctly change the version if we introduce something that is not backward compatible. I'm doing now, let's say some months later, and also working on that, I'm reviewing the database metadata in order to be more readable and easier to introduce the version checking there. So then there could be also, in case of simple database migration, we can also automate the stuff and make the upgrade and downgrade when makes sense automatic or not. But this is, of course, a different on a different layer, because it will apply only to the database, while your PR applies to basically every version and every update.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think I certainly to apologize. I think often these cases there's several things, unfortunately, all kind of happening at the same time, which was the case kind of we hit. And so part of the thinking with this was sometimes you can't have too many layers of protection when the possible downside of getting the wrong combination with in the wrong environment with the wrong kind of downgrade path, when the repercussion of that is corrupted data of some sort, the recovery from that can often be so kind of drawn out, even when people have backups of blocks or they have snapshots of disks. The issues you get into if you accidentally get the wrong combination of all these things and you end up with some corrupted data is sufficiently difficult that I think my view is you can't have too many layers of protection for some of these things. You don't want to go overdo it, and that's why I think having the default be off is probably a reasonable compromise. But offering as many layers of protection that can help someone avoid getting into corrupted state, is all the better. And yeah, I saw some of the work you're doing on the database metadata, which sounds great. And also I think the way we've stood the PR is a little bit more away from just downgrade protection to kind of phrasing it more as version to version protection more generally. And in this initial PR, it is specifically about downgrade, but that would allow you to do more arbitrary policing of version to version, up or down, other checks that aren't just about the version, that are about other parts of the data on disk or what have you.
Yeah, I agree that they are the two different aspects, because in any case we should protect, even if the user decided to downgrade, we should put the effort and try to avoid to corrupt data or other things. So when we do backward and compatible changes, we should also code the downgrade path, or at least detect that something could go wrong and protect it. And also, I understand that your is more like something I just want to go ahead by default, and is an exceptional task to downgrade in case. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm on mobile, so I can't raise my hand, but I just kind of wanted to echo Matt. I think this is good functionality, especially for like in mainnet use cases. You know, you got all of Ethereum backing up for you, so it's really easy to recover. And private networks, or in kind of bespoke one-off networks, that might not be the case. I definitely think that we can expand this in the future, like to make it maybe a little more robust for upgrade, downgrade, and capability based stuff. But this seems like a really good compromise. And I don't want to add complexity, but I thought that in light of your point about backups, we could just, and I'm not saying we have to do this in this PR, but it seems like this type of functionality would be logical to have enabled by default when you're not on a named network, where you don't have the expectation that there's a broader network that's going to be doing all of your backups for you in effect.
Yeah, that's certainly an option, is to default it in more cases. And I guess it would probably be the non-named network cases that would apply to. I could have a look at that, and I could bring it into the PR if that's. I suspect that's fairly small if we're happy that it would be defaulted in those cases.
I think that makes good sense, because you raise a really good point about backups and catastrophic downgrades and that type of situation where there's easy mitigations for named networks, but not necessarily as easy mitigations for enterprise or bespoke or other non-named networks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that sounds good. I'll look at adding that in.
One last thing on this, as Gary was talking about future improvements. So nothing for now, but would be now nice to have for UX perspective to have a kind of instruction when you try to downgrade, telling you which are the breaking changes since the previous version. Since with the version metadata file, you have the version that you are running, and you try to downgrade. So you have you could, if we write the breaking changes and destruction somewhere, we can also try to tell the user what happened during the two versions, and if they want to roll back, what they have to do.
Yeah,
that will be great for UX.
I think certainly once you have those two version numbers, those commit levels version numbers in your hand, then you'd have the ability, like you say, to render, display, give the user a list of diff, even when you're going up, when you're upgrading. you then you know where you're coming from, and so you can give someone almost like a live change log for the particular upgrade path that they're doing. I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Yes, I will review again after some time. So the PR. So
No problem. No, thanks, Fabio. Thanks for the discussion. It was really good.
thank you.
All right, let's keep moving on because we have 15 minutes left. The consensus seems to be let's kind of move forward this iteration and take note of what to do going forward. Okay. On the plugin API, I'm gonna go very fast because I want to give time for the last two, the GDPR and the event state-based architecture stuff. This one is very simple. If you've worked with the plugin API in Besu, contact me directly. That can be done on Discord. It can be done on email. My email is plastered everywhere. I'll put it right here, honestly. Well, maybe, I don't know. I don't know. My email's all over the place on Hyperledger stuff. Just get in touch with me. I'm looking for a round of feedback on the API. For the API itself, as in using the API, what we should extend, if we extend it at all, and how do we kind of improve it. But also for the documentation, I'm also working on creating a new set of documentation around the plugin API to encourage its use. So if you've ever looked at that API and you've been head scratching, if you've ever looked at the documentation and you've scratched your head, or the API or whatever, I want to hear any and all feedback. So this is just a call out to say, contact me, and I think I can put it there. Yeah. So I don't really need to spend any more time on it. If there's any notes right now, does anyone have particular feedback? Frankly, that's not on the consensus team because I'm gonna come for you later.
I don't have an awful lot to add other than that I've kind of used it in an oddie fashion to do bits and pieces, and I'm familiar with it enough to roughly know what you can do with it. But yeah, I don't think I can add anything more intelligible than that at this point particularly. I certainly didn't see anything that made me think, well, this is really hard to use particularly. A colleague has been starting to get a bit more involved in Besu, and he was looking at raising a PR for something recently around the allow list, deny list stuff, and I think he's going to look into the plugin API a bit possibly as well. So I will at least. I did invite him to come along to this call, but he couldn't make it. But I will point him at this as well, in case he's got any feedback.
Awesome. No tremendous rush. Okay, that's all I really needed. Renata, we can pass it on to you for what you'd like to discuss here.
Thank you, Lord. So just a small background why I decided to ask you. So we are working on Indie Besu, Hyperledger Indie Business Logic on Hyperledger Besu. So in Hyperledger Indie report we published some updates. Matt, thank you a lot for your interest for this pull request. Because of you, we could add a lot of new information about Besu, Indie Besu project. So, and my question here is about a different approach of architecture, because firstly we decided to store entities in state, and understood that it is not the best approach because of amount of gas. We use proof of authority, and it's not an issue for now, but in theory it's not too good to store something in the state. So we decided to use events after this, as it's usually in smart contracts. But after this, we started to think about GDPR. So we understand that event approach is much better and popular because of a lot of upsides. But at the same time, it is absolutely impossible from our point of view, hide transactions, hide events from a client. So in a state approach, we can just clean some state values. In event approach, we as far as I understand. We can't clean events. And here I have a question because I believe GDPR compliance is a common issue, is a common need. And what do you think? What approach do you use? And maybe there are some Besu plugins to hidden some events from end clients. So any ideas, any same issues? What do you think?
Renata, could you maybe give a quick example of like some of the GDPR? I'm familiar with GDPR. I'm not quite clear on the context it'll be applied here. And maybe just like a quick example of how, like, what would be a GDPR related feature that you tried to implement with events and how it was both better and worse than trying to do it through the state. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. So we are working with self-sovereign identity technology and store on the ledger side DID documents. There are identifier and some distributed identifier and some metadata and some public keys. So from our side, it is just anonymized information from GDPR view. It is some personal data in theory. And it should be possible to let's say hidden, but in fact remove some data from the ledger. We understand that blockchain ledger is not the best place where we can remove something, but at least hidden some data, some personal data from the state.
Okay, thank you. I'm probably gonna need to think about this a little bit more, but the first thing that jumps to mind is potential overlap with some of the work that's going on in mainnet with regard to blob space, where you basically to the state, you would write a KZG commitment that the data existed at the time. I have no idea whether or not this would be appropriate for your use case. But that would be one of the ways that it's done. If that's too wild, and it kind of feels kind of wild, I'd have to keep thinking about it. Anyone else got any ideas?
I like the KZG commitment idea, honestly. I think, like you, I would probably have to think about it a lot more to understand if this would make sense in this case. But I also wonder if there's like a simpler approach, which is, I mean, not even a simpler approach, but like, why is there a concern about gas costs? Is this on a mainnet chain, or is this going to be I assume this is like a non-incentivized network that doesn't have financial implications?
So for our project right now, it is just proof of authority, no gas price, no the issue. But in the community, think that it is worth to think about future and about publishing it on mainnet or something like this.
Okay,
that's
yeah, I think,
important.
yeah, it does sound a lot more like a KZG kind of, like a blob space type of solution you might want to explore.
Yeah,
Matt, why
also, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Fabio.
And also, for me, just to understand better, because it's difficult to think out to hide something on the blockchain at the moment. Because when you say you can't remove an event, I was also thinking that even if you write something in the state and later you remove that from the state, or you make it unreadable in some way, you should still have all the transaction history from the genesis. So you should be able to recover what you did from the initial transaction. So
yes, you're absolutely right. It's
so,
just
okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, for this it seems complex, with the current technology, unless the ZK stuff is something that is happening here.
Did you
Fully
look
agree.
into private transactions? Like
No, we
if-
don't use private. We thought about private transactions, but is it possible to make it public and private when we want with a special transaction? Or I thought all private transactions are already private.
Yeah, I think that's essentially there's going to probably need to be some attestation or some ZK magic that allows you to hide the actual data itself, but have the ability to attest, like Justin was implying with like if you were using blob space or if you were using some other sort of bespoke way to have this data both available but protected and hidden. It's a tall order, but I think that I think it's doable with some research. I think that I think the tools are there for it. It's just a matter of fitting them together in the right way to fit that use case that I don't truly understand yet.
But is it possible from the start having these transactions public and just change the status once?
No, like Fabio was saying, if you have a public transaction, you can always recreate. Yeah.
Yes. So we also thought about Besu plugins because Fabio is absolutely right. Anyway, we have all transactions on the ledger side, but at the same time, it is not the best solution, but it is okay having some CLI, some VDR from our side, some clients that can load, that can send read request and get response with the empty data. I mean, some statistic validation on the ledger side, not to share some specific data. So it will be possible to get all events or all transactions, but we stop reading of these transactions at the start, from the start request. So maybe it's possible to use some Besu plugins.
I think so, but I mean, if this is a an open P2P network, you can't really rely on everybody running the version of software and plugin that you have that's redacting this. So anybody who would sync the chain with different code would be able to recover this information.
It's a good idea. Thank you. I'll think about this. So maybe it's possible to force using of this plugin because of proof of authority at least. Okay, thank you. So thank you for your ideas. So anyway, just a small question. If anyone here use state storage instead of events? Okay, good to know. Thank you. Okay. Anyway, if there are specific issues with GDPR, with same issue with personal data, so just to get know, I'm here. I always ready to discuss it because it is our pain of Tombstone, different values and transactions on the state, on the ledger. Thank you for your ideas.
Anyone else have any comments on this?
I think you
Alright.
need to speak to a cryptographer, basically. I think a cryptographer is going to give you a lot better answers than a client implementer, to be frank.
All right, that seems we're at time. Thank you everyone for joining today. Any last comments? We have one more minute. Okay, everyone enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.